Welcome to City of Water 2026, Future City Inc.'s annual video on the environmental aspects of the Arthur Kill watershed, which borders both New Jersey and Staten Island. My name is Maria Isabella Ruiz, co-CEO and board treasurer for Future City Inc. and the Arthur Kill Watershed Association. Today I am honored to introduce the president and chief executive officer of the Waterfront Alliance, Julie Raskin.
Thank you, Isabella and future city friends. My name is Julie Raskin, and I am the new president and CEO of Waterfront Alliance. Waterfront Alliance has enjoyed a strong partnership with Future City Inc. since its formation. FCI has been a long-standing regional supporter of Waterfront Alliance's City of Water Day, and I'm so grateful for the continued support and partnership. Now in its 19th year, City of Water Day is focused on championing a climate-resilient New York and New Jersey harbor, something I know the FCI community strongly supports. City of Water Day 2026 celebrates what it means to live with water, being on it, near it, and connected to it. From rivers and bays to creeks and canals, our waterways are central to community life across New York and New Jersey. By getting people out on the water via kayaking, boating, learning, and exploring, we build deeper connections to the waterways that shape our region and bring communities together. This year's theme highlights water as a source of joy, belonging, and resilience, welcoming new communities to experience and care for their local waterways. I'm pleased that our Director of Policy and Government Affairs, Tyler Tauba, will be participating in this year's Future City Inc. City of Water Day video. Thank you again to Future City for all the incredible work you're doing. And thank you all those who are watching this video for joining us today. Happy City of Water Day.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Rodriguez, a senior at the Ramapo College of New Jersey, where I am earning a bachelor's in history and a minor in political science. Since I was a kid, I've always had an interest in history, especially New Jersey history. And it was this summer working with the Historical Society of Elizabeth and Future City Inc. that I also became interested in the environmental issues surrounding regional and local waterways, such as the Arthur Kill Channel. This year, the country is celebrating its 250th anniversary, and throughout that time, the Arthur Kill has been a steadfast presence. The Arthur Kill is 10 miles long and runs from the Raritan Bay in the south to Newark Bay in the north. It runs as the dividing line between East Jersey cities and Staten Island. The Kill contains two small islands, Prall's Island and the Isle of Meadows. Many major rivers flow into the Kill and from it, including the Passaic, Hackensack, Elizabeth, and Rahway rivers, and the surrounding area is home to numerous species of wildlife and marine life. The surrounding area of the Kill not only holds an environmental significance, but a historical one. Following the Kill south, Perth Amboy was one of the biggest and oldest ports used in the transatlantic slave trade. Later on in the 19th century, it would become a stop on the Underground Railroad. Across the Kill, Staten Island, is Tottenville, which houses the Conference House, the site of failed peace talks between the British and Americans during the Revolutionary War in September of 1776. Prior to the Revolutionary War, the British used Prall's Island as a location to grow hay for their horses. It is with great joy that I am thrilled to introduce and speak with Dr. Linda Caldwell Epps. Dr. Epps was born in Elizabeth and has been a resident of New Jersey for many years, and she is very knowledgeable on the history of the Arthur Kill Channel. Dr. Epps, thank you for talking with us today. If you could provide a brief introduction about yourself.
So, as you mentioned, I was born in Elizabeth, actually lived in the same house in Elizabeth for my first 22 years of life. Attended Rutgers University, attended Seton Hall and Drew Universities for advanced degrees, have been a major advocate of New Jersey history for many years. I actually was the president and CEO of the New Jersey Historical Society for a good period of time and did many exhibits and gave many talks on Elizabeth. But I don't think I've ever been asked to talk about the Arthur Kill before. And I'm particularly happy to do this because during my childhood, my father owned what we called a wood yard, and I'll explain that in a minute, that was right on the corner of South Park Street and Front Street with nothing else in view but the Arthur Kill if you looked straight ahead. So I really grew up in many ways on the Arthur Kill because of his place, and my younger brother and I spent a lot of time at that wood yard, especially during the summers. So the wood yard, this was during a time when lots of people used wood to heat their homes. So this was a sideline for my father, but a somewhat profitable sideline. But he also did other things there, like had barbecues during summer, Saturday nights, Friday and Saturday nights, fish fries, things like that. So it was a wood yard, but also a social center. And as a result, many of my memories of the Arthur Kill are pleasant ones. And the Arthur Kill area, the shoreline of Elizabeth, looked quite different than it does today.
This year, the country is celebrating the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. In a few words, how do you think the Arthur Kill fits into that history?
Well, we have to remember that New York, losing New York years earlier, was a big embarrassment for George Washington, although looking back on the number of troops that he had as opposed to that of the British, I can't figure out why he ever thought he could win that battle. Nevertheless, it was always sort of a knot for him that he lost New York, and regaining it was pivotal to the success of the colonists in winning that war. And that second attempted takeover of New York became successful because the British Army was so divided all over the colonies that they were not able to produce the manpower to protect the city. And there were a growing number of patriots that occupied the city that made it possible.
Who were the first to settle along the Arthur Kill? Who gave it that name?
The indigenous people used it for fishing, and that was the source of some of their water, but it was really a major food providing river for them. And actually they gave it its first name, Arthur Kill. The Dutch found it very useful, both for fishing again and for industrial work. It helped with their farming and other essential life-preserving activities.
What role has the Arthur Kill played in the region's founding and development?
The Arthur Kill under the Dutch and under the British rule and under the rule of the United States, which came about as a result of the Revolutionary War, was used for bartering, for selling human beings. Especially the port of Perth Amboy was a major spot or port for the importation of slaves because New Jersey did not charge incoming tax at that point. So it was cheaper for people to purchase slaves in New Jersey, in Perth Amboy, than it was for them to do it in New York or Pennsylvania waters. It also was extremely important during the Industrial Revolution for Elizabeth and Newark, which were major industrial cities during the early and the mid-19th century. Singer Sewing Machine Factory is actually built on the shores of the Arthur Kill. And if you look at the shoreline now, you see some of the remnants of industrialization that took place on both sides, the Staten Island side and on the New Jersey side. It was also a major form of just transportation before automobiles.
Can you talk about some of the historical and environmental significance of Staten Island in the Tottenville area?
We mentioned the fishing and especially crabbing that happened there, but also some of the land was suitable for farming and provided food, especially for the armies during the Revolutionary War, but provided food all during the early settlement of New York and New Jersey. In addition to providing food and water, it also had a very active wildlife that was there. There were deer. With the introduction of livestock, which was typically European livestock, to the New World, New York, Staten Island, there were pigs, there were cattle that were domesticated in those areas and that provided sustenance for the settlers that lived there.
What historical role did Perth Amboy have in the cultural and communal development along the Kill? How large has its impact been on the development of the region?
Perth Amboy, I remember reading, I believe it was while I was doing my dissertation, that Perth Amboy at one point was thought to be the capital city of New Jersey because there was so much activity at the port area where the Arthur Kill provides the port area. So it was major. It was a major place for shipping and receiving. It was convenient because it might have been a stop on its way to providing goods, not just for New Jersey, but for New York City as well, especially when New York City was occupied by the British. It also was a port for travel, for local travel, back and forth along the coast of what became the United States of America. And for many years, it was the largest city in New Jersey. The very sad part of the history of Perth Amboy being a very usable and viable port is its involvement or its complicitness in the act of the institution of slavery. There was a judge and a group of his friends in and around Perth Amboy that felt that the gradual emancipation of all people would come about sooner or later. So they started a slave ring that operated out of Perth Amboy, right on the pier there. So they would tell a parent who might have been free, your child is going to Alabama. You could go with that child. All you have to do is put your X here or sign your name here on this document, and I will take you down there with your child. What they were actually doing was selling themselves back into slavery again. And there are markers on the piers of the Arthur Kill in Perth Amboy paying homage to those people. We have the names of probably nearly 100 of them that were sold and deported south. But a very sad chapter in the history of Arthur Kill, the history of Perth Amboy, and the history of New Jersey.
The Arthur Kill has been vital to the region and does not only hold historical significance, but also holds an economic significance. In the past, Dutch settlers and the British settlers continued to use the kill as a place to dump industrial and sewage waste. Now, the kill is responsible for carrying 3/4 of all oil vessels that pass to the port of New York. Along the kill, there are 16 miles of refineries and over 20 oil and chemical companies. Over 100 commercial ships make their way through its waters daily, and it grants access to the New York Container Terminal, the ConocoPhillips Oil Terminal, and GATX facilities in New Jersey and New York. Via the Raritan Bay, the kill has direct access to the Atlantic Ocean.
Hello, my name is Anne-Marie Ramos, a Law and Society student at Ramapo College of New Jersey. This summer, I've had the amazing opportunity to work with Future City and explore our nearby waterways. I've learned of their significance, specifically the Elizabeth Marine Terminal and its surrounding ports. The Elizabeth Marine Terminal is one of the 6 major shipping terminals of the Port of New York and New Jersey, and the world's first container terminal as a result of Malcolm McLean's innovation. It's a crucial part of international trade and shipping and sits along the Arthur Kill waterway. The port acts as one of the busiest and important container terminals on the East Coast, bringing in about 3 million shipping containers a year. With 400,000 jobs and $200 billion worth of goods passing through, the port system is the heart of New Jersey's economy.
My name's Tyler. I've been at the Waterfront Alliance for 5 years, and I actually started as a fellow, so I know that path. And I'm now the Director of Policy and Government Affairs. My background really is mostly focused on climate resilience and adaptation, so thinking about flood resilience and how we can use our waterways as places that can absorb water in the event of major storms, but also as sea levels rise and during high tide events.
What legislative action or lack thereof has had a hand in worsening water contamination?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think I'd actually want to start by acknowledging that the waterways are cleaner than they've been in maybe over 100 or 150 years. And I think we should look at that as a big win and think about some of the legislation that actually helped get us there first, and then we can sort of talk about how that also is related to some of the contamination and the efforts to clean up some of the waterways. So, you know, if we're thinking about the waterways in the New York and New Jersey harbor region more broadly, a lot of the waterfront in the harbor region was historically industrial, and so, you know, it still is today. There's very much a legacy of industrial waterfront. You can see that in a lot of different communities, some of which still have active industry in them, but some of them have like abandoned warehouses and industry or piers and docks that are kind of crumbling into the water, but you can see the sort of fabric of what used to be there. So, you know, if you think about places like the Arthur Kill, for example, before 1972, you know, discharging raw, toxic, industrial kind of waste, chemical waste directly into the water bodies, whether it's the Arthur Kill, you could just dump toxic chemicals into the water and like it was maybe frowned upon, but there was nothing really holding you back from doing that. So in 1972, there was the passage of the Clean Water Act, which I think was a big game changer for waterfronts all across the country. And that made it illegal to discharge pollutants from a point source into a waterway directly without some really strict and high regulation and permits. And so, you know, that has had a tremendous impact on our waterfronts across the New York and New Jersey harbor region.
Okay, how does the state spread awareness on water contamination, if at all?
Yeah, so I think, you know, my understanding is that rather than solely relying on just statewide, state-level messaging, New Jersey, through the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, or NJDEP, pushes or encourages kind of local governments to also have a public awareness campaign about water contamination or water quality. We talked about the Clean Water Act, and as a result of that, there's all these kind of other mechanisms that come underway. And so New Jersey, under the kind of umbrella of the Clean Water Act, has what's called the Municipal Separate Storm System Permit, or MS4 permit, where I believe every town is legally required to operate some kind of public education program to reduce stormwater runoff, or just urban kind of rain or just water runoff generally, and also illicit chemical dumping.
So, why is it necessary, and what is the purpose of offshore wind facilities?
We were talking about around decarbonizing and renewable energy and reducing our reliance on fossil fuels so that we can reduce the impacts of the climate crisis and climate change. We do need to diversify our energy grid in our portfolio, and offshore wind presents a really great opportunity to do that, especially because there is so much wind offshore, and they have these kind of cables that lay underground and would bring energy to New Jersey, New York, and the region more broadly. So really the purpose here and the goal here is to diversify our energy grid to sustain our growing energy demand over the next kind of 50 or so years. And so adding new energy sources like solar and wind are a really great opportunity to bring clean energy to our region, and do it in a way that's sustainable.
So, are wind facilities the most environmentally sound option for clean energy?
Yeah, that's a good question, and maybe hard to say. Probably have to do like a life cycle assessment analysis and look at the whole cycle of a wind turbine versus a solar panel and all the things that go into it. But it's certainly much more environmentally friendly and sound than drilling, whether it's fracking or your traditional kind of fossil fuel extraction. So yes, it's much more sustainable than those sources are. It's completely relying on the wind that's moving the turbines, and that's what's kind of delivering the power into the grid and providing the power that's operating homes and businesses and the like.
Okay, so has the Waterfront Alliance faced any difficulties or challenges as an organization advocating for projects like this?
Overall, there's been a tremendous amount of support for it at the local level. I think the townships across New Jersey, the state of New Jersey, and even a lot of this is in partnership between New York and New Jersey, and so on the other side, New York as well, they've been really supportive. They put out kind of efforts and ambitious targets for how much offshore wind energy the states want to produce, and it's definitely to grow that over years and years. So we've seen a lot of support, whether it's from local and state agencies, local and state elected officials, even local and state organizations, environmental community-based organizations, definitely supporting this.
One last random question. Do you have a favorite climate initiative?
I am a big fan of making our public spaces these kind of dual functions of social and climate infrastructure together. So I'll give you an example in New Jersey and an example in New York, just because City of Water Day is a celebration of the waterfront in New York and in New Jersey. So in New Jersey, the Hoboken kind of Rebuild by Design Hudson River project is a really cool project that's looking at taking public space and following this kind of absorb, delay, store, where you absorb rainwater and flood water, hold on to it underground, so you're not really even seeing it. It's not like the park looks completely flooded. Slowly discharge it in a way that's not overwhelming the sewer system. In New York City, the NYCHA, or the New York City Housing Authority, there is a project at the South Jamaica NYCHA houses where they took this basketball court and they redeveloped the basketball court and they sunk it. So you have a basketball court and it's sunken down, and you have these kind of seats that people can kind of just sit and hang out and either watch the games or just hang out. And then you have a normal basketball court in a dry condition, totally normal. In a wet rain condition, that basketball court is sunken down so that it can hold and store water. It can hold and store rainwater and flood water that would otherwise be flooding the nearby NYCHA residents or the nearby homes and community that's around that area. And it's a really cool project, and I would think that that's another thing that we could scale all across New Jersey and New York. And there's lots of really cool projects like that where I think we can explore, permeable pavements, more green infrastructure solutions. So I'm really, really excited as a resilience kind of project, really transforming some of our public spaces and places to be this kind of dual social and climate infrastructure.
While the shipping terminals all along the coast have grown to be significant in economic development for their respective cities, they are also one of the leading causes of water contamination in the Arthur Kill and its connecting waterways. As a result of this, residents of the cities that lie along the coast are encouraged to take part in the catch and release program, a fishing practice where fish are carefully caught and immediately released back into the water. Not only does it prevent residents from consuming contaminated marine life, but it also maintains the integrity of the ecosystem.
Hello, my name is Timothy Aluko, a chemical engineering student at Rutgers University. As someone looking toward the future of technology and sustainable development, I'm fascinated by how city infrastructure scales to meet the massive demands of our modern society.
Hello, I'm Presley Iowa, a mechanical engineering student at Rutgers University. As someone interested in engineering and intelligence systems, I'm fascinated by how technology and infrastructure continue to shape the way people, goods, and communities stay connected. As America approaches its 250th anniversary, the Arthur Kill and Port Elizabeth are entering a new chapter, one defined by artificial intelligence, automation, and sustainability.
250 years ago, these waters carried agricultural goods on wooden boats. Today, Port Elizabeth is a logistics powerhouse fueling the East Coast. To survive and expand, Port Elizabeth needed a direct link to the interstate highway system. Therefore, major highway networks such as Route 1, Route 9, and the New Jersey Turnpike were directly influenced by the distribution needs of Port Elizabeth and the Greater Newark Elizabeth Port Complex.
For many years, waterways were our main mode of transportation. Then came the invention of the locomotive and the invention of the automobile, which changed our mode of traffic. It used to be that using the water was the most effective and probably perhaps the least expensive way to transport goods and to transport people back and forth to work. As I mentioned earlier, I can easily remember the ferry running from Elizabeth and the ferry service running, I believe, from Perth Amboy over to Staten Island and to Manhattan. Every day the boats were crowded just like the trains and the buses are today. And our creation of interstate highways, and just highways in general, made that travel much more convenient than water travel, especially inland. And it gave you a degree of privacy that you did not have on public transportation. There were also businesses that operated on the waterways that, as we were less ecologically or environmentally concerned about what we were doing to the waterways, started to take its toll on the manufacturing businesses that were there. The high cost of living in this area also took its toll and forced people, the manufacturing, to move to other areas. So we see on our shorelines a lot abandoned evidence of what once was, from abandoned ships to abandoned factories all along the Arthur Kill.
In addition to the rapidly changing geography, local factories that once defined the city of Elizabeth began to fade away.
The northeastern part of New Jersey was built on commerce and industrialization. The cities of like Newark and Elizabeth and Harrison really thrived and Perth Amboy and became major cities because of their use of the Great Falls as far as Patterson and the art. When business was taken away and jobs were no longer available, those cities went into major decline. People had to move where the jobs went. Middle class and lower class people who depended upon factory work to earn their living really suffered with the loss of industrialization, and that had a direct, the loss of the viable use of the waterways or need for the waterways was a direct cause of that.
In the 21st century, physical infrastructure alone cannot keep up with the global markets. Port Elizabeth is shifting from a purely physical infrastructure to an intelligent ecosystem powered by machine learning. This shift made significant progress in 2024 with the deployment of Grid Matrix. Grid Matrix was designed to assist staff with traffic flow and reduce data collection times. Streamlining operations at Port Elizabeth, alongside boosted efficiency, AI integration can reduce port emissions and operational costs and slash waiting times. The brains of Port Elizabeth lie in the digital overlay designed to utilize full-scale automation to connect data with the physical infrastructure at Port Elizabeth. Future plans for electric-powered crane systems aim to drastically increase handling speeds while lowering greenhouse gas emissions and noise pollution. Furthermore, The anticipated shift away from manual labor increases operational safety at the port.
As technology expands and improves at the port, so does our responsibility to the environment in which it sits. We cannot treat the Arthur Kill Waterway as just a vessel for commerce. It is also our partner in creating a more sustainable future. The Port Authority has committed to a 50% decrease in direct emissions by 2030 and zero direct or indirect emissions by 2050. This involves introducing a massive solar array to power the Newark Elizabeth supply and replacing diesel cargo ships with zero-emission ships to reduce the air pollution around the area. Just beyond the port, the Arthur Kill poses additional climate change-related challenges. The port has a massive plan to hit net zero emissions by 2050, but climate change is already happening with intense storms and rising tides. To better understand how we protect this important shoreline, we asked the Waterfront Alliance, how do you balance spending money to fix future issues with protecting the docks from flooding during storm surges today?
Such a good question. And this really, I think, gets into a more a bigger picture, kind of high-level question about the importance of climate sustainability and mitigation and climate resiliency and adaptation. So mitigation and sustainability is sort of what you're talking about with decarbonizing the port, electrifying some operations, essentially reducing the emissions that are associated with port infrastructure, even things like electrifying trucks and other kind of operations so you're not relying so much on diesel or fossil fuel. On the other hand, on the other side of your question is the resiliency and adaptation and how you protect the literal infrastructure that's there, that's operating, the docks and everything, the cranes, how you protect them from rising sea levels and climate change impacts that are happening today, the flooding that we're seeing today. And I'd even include extreme heat in that. You know, we're in the summer, we're already experiencing many heat waves, heat domes, and these kinds of things. And that does have impacts for the workers who are out there in that extreme heat. And so that's another area where we need to be thinking about adapting and being resilient. And how do you kind of balance those two things? So for a long time, I think there's been so much focus on the mitigation and sustainability and decarbonization side. And, you know, one could argue for good reason, because we have to decarbonize, reduce our emissions, reduce our reliance on fossil fuels to help kind of roll back and reduce the impacts of climate change that we're seeing, you know, that are happening as a result of a warming climate, warming temperatures, and decarbonizing and using renewable energy and all these kinds of great things. Electrification are the way that we the most quickly can bring those emissions down and start to see less climate impacts. But at the same time, we are already locked into some degree of climate impact. You know, the emissions that we're pumping out yet today and yesterday and even last year and the year before, that's not what we're feeling now. You know, we're feeling the impacts of emissions on a decades by decades timescale. And so we are baked into feeling some of these climate impacts already. We're locked into some degree of sea level rise. What amount, how many feet of that we're talking, that is dependent on our emissions, but we are seeing sea levels rising today.
For more than 2 centuries, the waters of the Arthur Kill have adapted to every era of change. From the canoes of the Lenape people to wooden merchant vessels to the rise of container shipping and global commerce, each generation has left its mark on these waters. And once again, the region stands at the beginning of a new chapter. The technologies of tomorrow may look different from those of today, but the purpose remains remarkably familiar: connecting communities, creating opportunities, and strengthening the unique bonds between people and place.
As America approaches its 250th anniversary, the Arthur Kill continues to tell a unique American story, one defined by movement, innovation, and resilience. 250 years ago, these waters carried agricultural goods and wooden boats. Today, Port Elizabeth stands at the center of one of the most advanced logistic networks in the world. And tomorrow, the same waterway that shaped the past may help define the future of intelligent infrastructure.